My son calls me at the same time every night and asks, "Are you alone?" If I say yes, he hangs up. If I say no, he insists on knowing who's with me. Last night, I lied and told him I was alone. I never imagined that would save me. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. The phone rang at exactly 10:47 p.m., as it had every night for the past 3 months. I was sitting in my late husband's armchair, the one by the window overlooking the apple orchard that stretched behind our Vermont farmhouse. The trees were bare now, skeletal fingers reaching toward a November sky. I'd been holding Robert's reading glasses, turning them over in my hands, wondering why I still kept them on the side table after 2 years. "Hello, Albert," I said, not bothering to check the caller ID. My son's punctuality was almost pathological. "Mom," his voice came through tight, controlled. "Are you alone?" The question. Always the same question. I glanced around the living room. The faded floral sofa Robert and I had bought 30 years ago. The grandfather clock that had belonged to my mother. The wedding photo on the mantel where we both looked impossibly young. The house felt enormous in its emptiness. Every room echoing with the absence of the man who'd filled them with his laugh, his presence, his life. "Yes," I said. "I'm alone." The line went dead. I stared at the phone in my hand, listening to the silence that followed. This was new. Usually, when I said yes, Albert would launch into a 15-minute monologue about proper security, about keeping doors locked, about the dangers of rural isolation for a woman my age. He'd inherited his father's concern, but none of his warmth. Tonight, just silence and a disconnected call. I set the phone down, my hand trembling slightly. At 63, I'd learned to trust my instincts. And right now, they were screaming that something was wrong. The house settled around me with its familiar creaks and groans. I'd lived here for 40 years, raised Albert within these walls, buried my husband from the front parlor. I knew every sound, every draft, every peculiarity, which is why I noticed immediately when the kitchen door handle turned. I'd locked it. I always locked it after dinner. My breath caught in my throat. I remained perfectly still in the armchair, partially hidden from the kitchen's view by the wide doorframe. Through the gap, I could see a shadow moving across the mudroom window. Someone was trying to get in. My mind raced. The phone was on the side table. I could call 911, but the nearest sheriff's deputy was 20 minutes away on a good night. The gun Robert had kept was locked in the bedroom safe, and I'd never learned the combination. He'd always meant to teach me, but there was always tomorrow, until there wasn't. The handle stopped moving. Silence stretched out, thick and suffocating. Then I heard footsteps retreating across the gravel driveway. I waited 5 full minutes before moving, my heart hammering against my ribs. When I finally stood, my legs felt weak. I crept to the kitchen window and peered out through the curtain. Nothing. Just darkness and the distant security light by the barn. But on the kitchen table, I saw something that hadn't been there before. A white envelope, unsealed, sitting in the exact center of the table. My hands shook as I approached it. The envelope was expensive cardstock, the kind used for wedding invitations or formal announcements. There was no name on it, no address, no marking of any kind. I should have called the police. That's what a sensible person would do. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the 40 years of self-reliance that farm life demands. Or maybe it was the memory of Albert's voice on the phone, that strange urgency in his question. "Are you alone?" I opened the envelope. Inside was a single photograph, old and slightly faded. It showed this house, my house, but from at least 30 years ago, judging by the young apple trees and the original barn that had burned down in 1998. Standing in front of the house were 4 people. Robert, looking handsome and young in his work clothes. Myself, barely 30, holding baby Albert. And 2 people I didn't recognize. A tall man with dark hair and a woman with a severe expression. On the back, in handwriting I didn't know, was written, "The Partnership, 1992. Some debts never expire." My mouth went dry. 1992, the year we bought this farm. The year Robert had come home one day with the down payment in cash, telling me his uncle had died and left him an inheritance. I'd never questioned it. We'd been struggling, working 3 jobs between us, dreaming of land of our own. The money had seemed like a miracle. But Robert had been an only child, and both his parents had been only children too. He'd had no uncle. I turned the photograph over again, studying the strangers' faces. The man had his hand on Robert's shoulder in a way that seemed possessive, proprietary. The woman was looking at me with an expression I could now recognize as something close to contempt. Who were these people? And why was someone leaving me this photograph now, 2 years after Robert's death? The phone rang again. I nearly dropped the photograph. This time it wasn't Albert. The number was blocked. Hello? My voice came out stronger than I felt. Mrs. Diane Hartwell? A man's voice, smooth and educated, with the faintest trace of a Boston accent. Yes. My name is James Thornton. I'm an attorney. I apologize for the late hour, but I've been trying to reach you for some time. Your son has been intercepting my calls. My grip tightened on the phone. What are you talking about? I represent the estate of Catherine and William Morse. They passed away 6 months ago in a car accident in Maine. You're named in their will, Mrs. Hartwell. Named quite prominently, in fact. The room tilted slightly. I sat down hard in the nearest chair. I don't know anyone by those names. Perhaps not by name, Thornton said carefully. But I believe you knew them 33 years ago, when you and your late husband acquired your property. I looked down at the photograph in my hand, at the severe-looking woman and the tall man with his possessive grip on Robert's shoulder. What do they want? I whispered. Want? Mrs. Hartwell? They're dead. But they've left you something. Something your son is very eager to prevent you from receiving. Tell me, has he been calling you every night, asking if you're alone? My blood turned to ice. How do you know that? Because he's been in my office 3 times, trying to gain power of attorney over your affairs. He claims you're experiencing cognitive decline, that you're not competent to handle your own business. He's been quite insistent. The words hit me like physical blows. Albert, my son, trying to declare me incompetent? That's absurd, I said, but my voice shook. I'm perfectly capable. I know you are, which is why I needed to reach you directly. Mrs. Hartwell, the Morses left you a document, a contract, signed by your husband in 1992, and a letter explaining everything. But I need to give these to you in person, and I need to do it before your son realizes we've made contact. What kind of contract? The kind that makes you a very wealthy woman, and the kind that explains why someone might want to keep you isolated and confused. Mrs. Hartwell, are you truly alone in that house? I thought about the envelope on the table, the person who'd tried the door. I don't know anymore, I said honestly. Listen to me carefully. Don't tell anyone about this call. Not your son, not anyone. I'm driving up from Boston now. I can be there by 1 a.m. Can you stay awake? Can you stay safe? I looked around my kitchen, the room where I'd made 40 years of breakfasts, where I'd nursed Albert through childhood illnesses, where Robert and I had planned our future over countless cups of coffee. It suddenly felt like foreign territory, full of shadows and secrets. Mrs. Hartwell? Thornton's voice was urgent. Are you there? I'm here, I said. I'll be waiting. Keep your doors locked. If anyone comes to the door before I arrive, even if it's your son, don't let them in. Do you understand? Yes. Good. I'll see you soon. He hung up. I sat in the kitchen for a long moment, staring at the photograph. The partnership, 1992. Some debts never expire. Robert had lied to me. Albert was trying to have me declared incompetent. Someone had tried to enter my house, and 2 strangers I'd never heard of had died and left me. What? Money? Property? Secrets? The grandfather clock in the living room chimed 11. I had 2 hours before Thornton arrived. 2 hours to figure out what I was dealing with, to decide if I could trust him, to protect myself from whatever was coming. I stood and walked to Robert's study, the one room in the house I'd barely touched since his death. His desk was exactly as he'd left it, neat, organized, everything in its place. Robert had been meticulous, almost obsessively so. I started opening drawers. In the third one down, hidden beneath a stack of old farm equipment manuals, I found another envelope. Same expensive cardstock, same unmarked surface. Inside was a key, old brass, the kind that might open a safe deposit box, and a note in Robert's handwriting. Diane, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry. For everything. The key opens box 247 at First National in Burlington. Go alone. Tell no one, especially not Albert. He doesn't understand. He can't understand. Some secrets are meant to protect, not harm. I loved you. Always. R. My hands trembled as I held the note. Robert had known something, had left me a way to find out what. The phone rang again. Albert, right on schedule for his second attempt. This time, when he asked, "Are you alone?" I made a decision that would change everything. "No," I lied. "Sheriff's deputy stopped by. He's still here, checking the perimeter. Thought he saw someone in the orchard." The silence on the other end was longer this time. When Albert spoke again, his voice was different. Harder, colder. "That's good, Mom. That's real good. You stay safe tonight. I'll come by tomorrow morning. First thing. We need to talk." "About what?" "About the future. About what's best for you. Sleep well, Mom." He hung up before I could respond. I stared at the phone, at the key, at the photograph. Tomorrow morning. He'd said it like a threat. But tonight, I had 2 hours. 2 hours to learn the truth. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt something I hadn't expected. I felt ready to fight. I had 90 minutes before Thornton arrived. 90 minutes to search a house full of 40 years of accumulated life for answers my husband had deliberately hidden. I started in Robert's study, working methodically through every drawer, every file folder, every book on the shelves. Farm records, tax returns, equipment receipts. Everything was meticulously organized and appeared completely ordinary. Too ordinary. Robert had been hiding something, which meant he'd been good at it. I checked my watch. 11:30. The house felt different now, charged with secrets. Every shadow seemed darker, every creak more ominous. In the filing cabinet, I found our property deed. I'd never actually read it before. Robert had handled all the paperwork. Now, studying it by lamplight, I saw something that made my stomach clench. The property hadn't been purchased outright in 1992. It had been transferred. The previous owners were listed as William and Catherine Morse, the couple in the photograph, the couple whose estate I was supposedly named in. We hadn't bought this farm. We'd been given it. Why would anyone give away a 100-acre farm with a house and barn? What had Robert done to earn that kind of gift? The grandfather clock struck midnight, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. "Get it together, Diane," I told myself. "You've lived through Robert's cancer, through running this farm alone, through 2 Vermont winters without him. You can handle this." I moved to the bedroom, to Robert's closet. His clothes still hung there. I hadn't been able to part with them yet. I ran my hands along the pockets of his jackets, feeling foolish, like a character in a movie. But in the inside pocket of his good Sunday blazer, I found something. A business card, old and worn from being handled repeatedly. Morse and Associates, private investment firm. William Morse, senior partner. An address in Boston. A phone number that had been disconnected. I tried it immediately. Private investment. Partnership. The words from the photograph echoed in my mind. I sat on the edge of the bed, trying to piece it together. Robert had worked for William Morse in some capacity. They'd invested in something together. And somehow, Robert had ended up with their farm. The headlights swept across the bedroom wall. I froze. It was only 12:15. Too early for Thornton. I moved to the window and peered out through the curtain. A dark SUV had pulled into my driveway, its engine still running. As I watched, Albert got out of the driver's side. My son. Here. Now. He was supposed to come tomorrow morning. He'd said tomorrow morning, unless he'd lied, unless he'd never intended to wait. I watched him walk to the front door, his movements purposeful, confident. He had a key. Of course he had a key. I'd given him one years ago for emergencies. This qualified as an emergency, but not the kind I'd imagined when I'd handed him that key. I heard it turn in the lock downstairs, heard the front door open. "Mom?" Albert called out. His voice echoed through the house. "Mom, I know you're here. Your car's in the driveway." I didn't answer. My mind raced. The lawyer had said not to let anyone in, even Albert, especially Albert. Mom, I talked to Sheriff Daniels. There was no deputy sent out here tonight. You lied to me. His footsteps moved through the first floor. I could track his progress. Living room, kitchen, dining room. He was searching methodically, just as I had been. I'm trying to help you, he called out. You're confused. The lawyer who called you, James Thornton, he's not who he says he is. He's trying to scam you, to take advantage of your grief. I pressed my back against the bedroom wall, barely breathing. He was at the bottom of the stairs now. Mom, please, I'm worried about you. These paranoid thoughts, the lying, these are signs. Dad would want me to take care of you. Don't bring your father into this, I thought with sudden fierce anger. Don't you dare use him as justification. Albert's footsteps started up the stairs. Heavy, deliberate. Not the sound of a worried son. The sound of someone who'd already made up his mind. I moved silently to the bedroom door and turned the lock. It wouldn't hold him for long if he really wanted in, but it might buy me time. Mom! His voice was sharper now, right outside the door. He tried the handle. Why is this locked? Are you in there? I'm fine, Albert. Go home. Come back tomorrow, like you said. Open the door. No. The silence that followed was worse than his anger would have been. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. Softer, more manipulative. I recognized this tone from his childhood, from the times he'd tried to convince me that the broken window or the missing money hadn't been his fault. Mom, I love you. You know that, right? Everything I'm doing is because I love you. But you're not thinking clearly. The farm is too much for you. The isolation is affecting your judgment. I've been talking to some excellent care facilities. I'm 63 years old and I can still outwork men half my age. I don't need a facility. You're having paranoid delusions. You lied about a sheriff's deputy being here. You're refusing to open your bedroom door to your own son. These aren't the actions of someone who's coping well. Through the door, I heard another sound. Paper rustling. He'd found something. Interesting, Albert said, his voice taking on a new edge. A key. And a note from Dad. About a safe deposit box in Burlington. A pause. Box 247. Tell no one, especially not Albert. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Well, that's pretty clear, isn't it? Did you find this tonight, Mom? Is that what this is all about? My heart sank. I'd left the note on Robert's desk when I'd moved on to search the bedroom. That's private, I said. Private? Mom, Dad's been dead for 2 years. Whatever he was hiding, it's time to bring it into the light. For your own good. Give me back that note. I don't think so. In fact, I think tomorrow morning, you and I are going to take a drive to Burlington together. We're going to open that box and see what Dad was so worried about. And then we're going to have a serious conversation about your future. I'm not going anywhere with you. Yes, Albert said, and his voice had gone cold and flat. You are. Because if you don't, I'm going to the court tomorrow afternoon with 3 doctors who've reviewed my documentation of your declining mental state. By tomorrow evening, I'll have emergency guardianship, and you won't have a choice about anything anymore. The words hit me like ice water. He'd been planning this. The nightly phone calls, the questions about whether I was alone. He'd been building a case, documenting what he'd call evidence of isolation and paranoia. You can't do that, I said, but my voice shook. I can. I have. The only question is whether you make this easy or hard. Open the door, Mom. Let's talk about this like adults. I looked at the clock on the nightstand. 12:35. Thornton wouldn't be here for at least another 25 minutes. Could I hold Albert off that long? I need a minute, I said. Let me get dressed. I'm in my nightgown. You have 2 minutes. His footsteps retreated slightly, but I could tell he was still right outside the door. I moved to the window. The bedroom was on the 2nd floor, but there was a trellis below. Old and probably rotten, but it had held Robert's climbing roses for 20 years. Could it hold me? Did I have a choice? I eased the window open as quietly as I could, wincing at every small sound. The November air rushed in, cold and sharp. I looked down. The trellis looked even more fragile from this angle. Time's up, Mom. The door handle rattled. I swung my leg over the windowsill. "Mom!" Albert's voice rose. "What are you doing? Are you—" The door crashed open just as I lowered myself onto the trellis. I heard Albert swear, heard him rush to the window. "Mom, stop! You're going to hurt yourself!" But I was already climbing down, my hands finding holds by instinct, my body remembering how to move despite the years. The trellis creaked and groaned, but it held. My feet touched the ground just as the top of the trellis pulled away from the house with a crack like a gunshot. I stumbled backward, landing hard on the cold earth. Above me, Albert leaned out the window. "Mom, are you insane?" I got to my feet, my hip aching but functional, and ran. Not toward the driveway. Albert would just catch me with his SUV. Instead, I ran toward the orchard, toward the darkness between the bare trees. "Mom!" Albert was on his phone now. I could hear his voice carrying across the night. "Yeah, it's me. She's running. Found the note about the box. We need to move up the timeline." I kept running, my breath coming in short gasps, branches catching at my clothes. Who was he talking to? Who else was involved in this? I reached the old equipment shed at the far edge of the orchard and ducked inside, pressing myself against the wall. Through the gaps in the boards, I could see the house lights, could see Albert's silhouette moving through the rooms. My phone. I'd left my phone in the house. I was alone, in the dark, in my nightgown and slippers, while my son hunted me through my own property. The absurdity of it would have been funny if it weren't so terrifying. A new set of headlights turned into the driveway. For a wild moment, I hoped it was Thornton, arriving early. But this was a sedan, and I watched a woman get out. Tall, elegant, expensive coat. Rachel, Albert's wife. She walked up to the house like she owned it, and Albert met her at the door. They spoke in low tones I couldn't hear, but their body language was clear. They were strategizing, planning. Rachel had never liked me. She'd made that clear from the moment Albert brought her home 8 years ago. She found the farm quaint and dirty, found my lifestyle unsophisticated, but I'd never imagined she'd help Albert do whatever this was, unless she was the one who'd pushed him into it. I shivered in the cold shed, watching my son and daughter-in-law hunt for me. The farm that had been my sanctuary for 40 years had become a trap, another set of headlights. This time, a silver Mercedes. Expensive. Out of place. James Thornton stepped out, carrying a leather briefcase. He looked at the 2 cars in the driveway, at Albert and Rachel standing on the porch, and his expression hardened. He was early. Thank God he was early. I watched him approach the house, watched the confrontation unfold in pantomime. Albert blocking the door, Thornton showing identification, Rachel on her phone, agitated. Then Thornton did something unexpected. He handed Albert a document, said something sharp, and got back in his car. But he didn't drive away. He pulled to the side of the driveway and killed the engine. Waiting. Albert and Rachel retreated into the house. The lights went on in every room. They were searching for me. I had to get to Thornton, had to reach that car. But 50 yards of open ground lay between the equipment shed and the driveway, and Albert had positioned himself at the window with a clear view. The phone in the house rang. I could hear it even from here, shrill and insistent. Once, twice, 3 times. It stopped. Then, moments later, every light in the house went out. The power. Someone had cut the power. In the darkness, I heard Rachel's voice rise in alarm, saw flashlight beams sweep through the windows. This was my chance. Maybe my only chance. I ran. I ran through the darkness, my slippers silent on the frost-hardened grass. Behind me, I heard Albert shout something, heard Rachel's higher-pitched response. The flashlight beam swung wildly, searching. But I was already at Thornton's Mercedes, yanking open the passenger door and throwing myself inside. "Drive," I gasped. "Drive now." Thornton didn't hesitate. The engine roared to life, and we shot backward down the driveway, gravel spraying. In the rearview mirror, I saw Albert running after us, his face twisted with rage in the scattered light from Rachel's flashlight. We hit the main road and Thornton accelerated, the farmhouse disappearing behind the bare trees. Only then did I realize I was shaking uncontrollably, my nightgown soaked with cold sweat despite the November chill. "Mrs. Hartwell?" Thornton said calmly, as if elderly women in nightgowns fled their homes into his car every day. I brought a blanket. It's in the back seat. I reached back and pulled it around my shoulders, the wool rough but warm. Thank you. I assume that was your son. And his wife. They were searching for me. He found the note Robert left about the safe deposit box. He's planning to have me declared incompetent tomorrow. Thornton nodded grimly. He called my office this afternoon. Threatened legal action if I contacted you. Said you were susceptible to fraud due to diminished mental capacity. He glanced at me. You just climbed out a second-story window and outran 2 people 30 years younger. I'd say your capacity is fine. Despite everything, I almost smiled. Where are we going? Somewhere safe. Somewhere we can talk. He pulled out his phone and handed it to me. First, call the sheriff. Report a break-in. Your son entered your home uninvited and you felt threatened. That's the truth, isn't it? He has a key. I gave it to him. Did you give him permission to use it tonight? To trap you in your bedroom? To hunt you through your property? I took the phone. No. Then it's trespassing at minimum. Make the call. My hands still trembled as I dialed. Sheriff Daniels answered on the 3rd ring, his voice thick with sleep. I explained what had happened. A carefully edited version that kept to the facts without mentioning lawyers or safe deposit boxes or mysterious partnerships from 1992. You want me to send someone out? Daniels asked. No, I'm safe now. I'm with a friend. But I wanted it documented, in case there are further problems. Albert giving you trouble? I know you two have had your differences since Robert passed. Had we? I'd thought we were fine. Distant, perhaps, but fine. How much had I missed, wrapped up in my own grief? Just document it, please, Sheriff. I'll come by tomorrow to give a formal statement. After I hung up, Thornton drove in silence for several minutes. We were heading toward Burlington, the lights of the small towns flickering past. Finally, he pulled into the parking lot of a 24-hour diner, one of those chrome and neon places that looked frozen in time. Coffee, he said. And conversation. Inside, where there are witnesses and cameras. Smart. I was beginning to trust this man's judgment. The diner was nearly empty. Just a trucker at the counter and a waitress who looked too tired to care about a woman in a nightgown covered by a blanket. We took a corner booth, and Thornton ordered coffee for both of us. When the waitress left, he opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick file folder. Before I show you these documents, he said, I need to explain something. William and Catherine Morse died 6 months ago. Their car went off a bridge in Maine during a storm. The police ruled it an accident. He paused. I'm not convinced it was. My coffee cup froze halfway to my lips. You think they were murdered? I think they knew something dangerous. And I think your husband knew it too. He slid a document across the table. This is William Morse's statement to me, recorded 2 weeks before he died. He knew he was in danger. He wanted to make sure certain information reached you if anything happened to him. I picked up the document with shaking hands. It was a typed transcript, legal and official looking, but the words were anything but formal. My name is William Morse. I am 78 years old and of sound mind. This statement is made voluntarily and witnessed by James Thornton, attorney at law. In 1992, I was a senior partner in a private investment firm. We specialized in venture capital, but we also engaged in certain irregular transactions. Transactions that involved money from sources that preferred to remain anonymous. Robert Hartwell worked for me as an accountant. He was brilliant with numbers, meticulous, trustworthy. Or so I thought. In the spring of 1992, Robert discovered that I had been laundering money for a criminal organization. $3 million over 2 years, funneled through legitimate investments. He came to me with the evidence. I expected him to go to the police. Instead, he made me an offer. He wanted out, wanted to disappear with his wife and son, to start a legitimate life somewhere far from Boston. In exchange for his silence, I would give him my farm in Vermont, the property my wife and I had planned to retire to, and enough money to run it for the first 5 years. He would take the evidence with him, hidden somewhere safe, as insurance. I had no choice. I agreed. Robert Hartwell was an honest man forced into a dishonest position because he wanted to protect his family. He didn't know, couldn't have known, That the people I was involved with don't forget, don't forgive. I've spent 33 years looking over my shoulder. So has Catherine. And now they've found us. I know it. I can feel it. If you're reading this, Diane, I'm dead. And Robert is already dead. That's no coincidence. The evidence Robert took, financial records, recordings, names, it's still out there. He told me he'd hidden it somewhere at the farm. Somewhere you'd find it only if you needed to. He said you were smarter than anyone gave you credit for, and that if he died unexpectedly, you'd figure it out. You need to find it, Diane. Not for the money. God knows there's enough of that. And I'm leaving you everything I have to make up for the danger I put your family in. You need to find it because they're coming for you next. Your son Albert doesn't know the full story. He only knows pieces. Enough to make him dangerous, not enough to keep him safe. Someone got to him years ago, fed him information, turned him against you slowly. He thinks he's protecting the family name, protecting his inheritance. He doesn't realize he's working for the people who killed his father. Trust no one. Find the evidence. And for God's sake, stay alive. William Morse. I read the statement 3 times, my hands shaking so badly the paper rattled. When I finally looked up at Thornton, my voice came out as a whisper. Robert was killed? I believe so. The cancer diagnosis was legitimate, but I think it was accelerated. There are compounds that can speed up cellular deterioration, make natural disease progress faster, difficult to detect, especially in someone already terminal. But why? After 33 years? Because someone started asking questions. Someone with connections discovered the old money laundering operation and began investigating. William Morse's name came up. And when it did, someone remembered Robert Hartwell, the accountant who disappeared with evidence that could still destroy them. I thought about Robert's final months, the rapid deterioration, how the doctors had been surprised by how quickly the cancer spread, how he'd seemed almost relieved at the end, as if he'd been expecting worse. He knew, I said. He knew they'd found him. I think he suspected. That's why he left you the note, the key. He was trying to give you a way to protect yourself. And Albert? The name tasted bitter in my mouth. Albert is working for them? Not knowingly, but yes, someone has been manipulating him, feeding him information, probably for years, making him believe that you're losing your mental capacity, that the farm should be sold, that you need to be placed in care. Thornton's expression hardened. Once you're declared incompetent and Albert has power of attorney, the farm can be searched thoroughly. The evidence Robert hid will be found and destroyed. And you, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. I'll be put in a facility where no one will believe anything I say, I finished. Where I can have an accident, a fall, a medication error. Yes. The trucker at the counter paid his bill and left. The waitress refilled our coffee without comment. The normalcy of it felt surreal. What's in the safe deposit box? I asked. I don't know, but I think it's a map. Instructions. The beginning of the trail to the real evidence. Thornton pulled out another document. This is William Morse's will. He left you his entire estate. $4 million. The house in Maine. Everything. But there's a condition. You can only access it once you've found Robert's evidence and turned it over to the FBI. $4 million. The amount William had laundered. Payment for my silence or for my danger. Maybe both. There's something else, Thornton said. He slid a photograph across the table. It showed a man in his 50s, silver-haired, handsome in an expensive suit. Do you recognize this man? I studied the photo. Something about the eyes seemed familiar, but I couldn't place it. No. Should I? His name is James Carver. He was William Morse's partner in the money laundering operation. He's also a very successful businessman now. Legitimate, or so it appears. Owns a chain of medical supply companies. Sits on several corporate boards. Very respected. And he's been visiting your son regularly for the past year. Albert thinks Carver is a business consultant, helping him plan his financial future. In reality, Carver's been the one feeding him information about your supposed mental decline, preparing him to take control. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The nightly phone calls asking if I was alone. Albert's increasing insistence that the farm was too much for me. Rachel's sudden interest in my health. Her suggestions about nice facilities for seniors. They'd been preparing the ground slowly and carefully for my removal. "How do you know all this?" I asked. Thornton hesitated. "Because William Morse hired a private investigator before he died. Someone to watch his family and yours. Someone who documented every meeting between Carver and your son." He pulled out another file, this one thick with photographs, transcripts, surveillance reports. "It's all here, but it won't be enough to convict Carver of anything. The only real evidence is what Robert hid." I looked at the pile of documents, the photographs, the proof of my son's betrayal. My Albert, who I'd raised, who I'd loved, who'd sat at Robert's bedside and cried when his father died. He'd been manipulated, yes, but he'd also been willing to believe I was incompetent, willing to put me away. "We need to get to that safe deposit box," I said. "Now, tonight. The bank doesn't open until 9 a.m. Then we wait. But not here." I pulled the blanket tighter around my shoulders. "Carver knows about the box by now. Albert will have told him. They'll be waiting at the bank. I've thought of that." Thornton pulled out his phone and made a call. "Gregory, it's James. I need the favor." "Yes, tonight. First National Burlington. Box 247. 20 minutes? You're a lifesaver." He hung up and smiled. "Gregory Evans is the bank president. We went to law school together. He's meeting us at the bank in 20 minutes with security. Private access, no public entrance. No way for anyone to know we're there until we're done." I felt a surge of hope. Can we trust him? With my life. And now, with yours. We left money on the table and headed back to the car. As Thornton started the engine, I caught sight of myself in the side mirror, hair wild, face pale, still in my nightgown under the blanket. I looked like a madwoman. Maybe I was. Maybe this whole thing was exactly what Albert said. Paranoid delusions brought on by grief and isolation. But then I remembered the coldness in my son's voice when he'd threatened guardianship, the way Rachel had smiled when she'd mentioned care facilities, the photograph of William and Catherine Morse with their hands on Robert's shoulders all those years ago. No, this was real. All of it. "Mrs. Hartwell," Thornton said as we drove through the quiet streets toward the bank. "Whatever we find in that box, whatever Robert left you, are you prepared to see this through? To go against your own son if necessary?" I thought about Albert as a baby, as a child, as the teenager who'd helped Robert with the farm work. I thought about the man he'd become, the man willing to lock away his mother to get what he wanted. "He stopped being my son the moment he decided I was an obstacle instead of a person," I said. "So yes, I'm prepared." The bank rose before us, dark and imposing. A single car was parked by the side entrance. Gregory Evans, waiting as promised. We were about to open Robert's last secret, and whatever we found inside would either save me or destroy me. Either way, there was no turning back now. Gregory Evans was younger than I'd expected, maybe 45, with wire-rimmed glasses and the kind of tired expression that came from being woken at 1 a.m. But his handshake was firm, and his eyes were sharp as they assessed me. Nightgown, blanket, and all. "James tells me you're in trouble," he said simply. "That's putting it mildly," I replied. He nodded and unlocked the side entrance. "Security is here, but they're staying in the monitoring room. No record of this access will show in the regular logs. As far as anyone knows, you were never here." We followed him through the dim corridors to the vault. The bank felt different at night, more like a mausoleum than a place of business. Our footsteps echoed on the marble floors. Chen used 2 keys and a code to open the vault door. Inside, rows of safe deposit boxes lined the walls, each one holding someone's secrets. Box 247 was in the middle row, eye level. "I'll need your key and identification," Evans said to me. I handed him the brass key Robert had left me. "I don't have my ID. It's back at the house." Chen looked at Thornton, who pulled out his phone and showed him something. Probably the private investigator's photos. Proof of my identity. Evans studied it, then studied me, and finally nodded. "Good enough for tonight. But Mrs. Hartwell? Officially, this access never happened. Understood?" Understood. He inserted both keys, his master and my brass one, and the box slid out with a soft metallic sound. It was larger than I'd expected, maybe 2 feet long. "I'll give you privacy," Evans said, and stepped outside the vault. Thornton and I stood looking at the box. This was it. Robert's final message to me, hidden for 2 years, waiting for the moment I'd need it. I lifted the lid. Inside were 3 items: a USB drive, a letter in Robert's handwriting, and a small leather journal. My hands trembled as I picked up the letter. The envelope was addressed simply, Diane. I opened it. "My dearest Diane, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you found yourself in danger. I'm so sorry. Every choice I made to protect you and Albert, but I see now that some choices only delay the inevitable. In 1992, I discovered that my employer, William Morse, was laundering money for a criminal organization run by James Carver. $3 million over 2 years. I had all the proof. Financial records, recorded conversations, everything needed to send them both to prison for 20 years. I should have gone to the police. That's what an honest man would have done. But I thought about you, about baby Albert, about the cramped apartment, and the 3 jobs between us and how tired you always looked. And I thought about that farm we'd driven past, the one you'd fallen in love with the apple orchard and the view of the mountains. So I made a devil's bargain. I traded my silence for that farm, for our future. Morse agreed because he had no choice. Carver never knew. Morse kept that secret to protect both of us. But Morse warned me. If Carver ever found out, if anyone ever discovered what I'd done, we'd all be dead. For 33 years, I kept the evidence hidden. The USB drive contains everything: financial records, audio recordings, email chains, enough to destroy Carver and everyone connected to him. The journal contains my own documentation, the story of how I discovered it all, my insurance policy written in my own hand. I buried the originals, Diane. I buried them on our property, where only someone who truly knows the land would think to look. The USB is a copy, but it will be enough to get the FBI interested. The journal will tell them where to dig. But there's something else you need to know. Something that will hurt you. And I'm sorry for that most of all. Albert knows pieces of this story. Not everything, but enough to be dangerous. 10 years ago, he found some old documents in the barn. Papers I'd thought I'd destroyed. He confronted me. Demanded to know the truth about the farm, about where our money came from. I told him a version of the truth. I told him I'd once worked for criminals, that I'd stolen from them to buy the farm, that if anyone ever found out, we'd lose everything. I made him promise to keep the secret, to protect the family. I thought I was protecting him by telling him. Instead, I gave him a weapon to use against us both. Because Albert didn't see it the way I intended. He saw a father who was a thief, who'd built everything on lies. He saw a farm that was stolen property, that could be taken away at any moment. And I think, God help me, I think it made him ashamed. He changed after that conversation, became distant. Married Rachel 6 months later. A woman who shares his new values: respectability, legitimacy, distance from anything that might taint the family name. If someone has gotten to Albert, if someone is using him against you, it's because he's vulnerable to it. He already believes his inheritance is dirty. It wouldn't take much to convince him that protecting himself means betraying you. I wish I'd never told him. I wish I'd gone to the police in 1992 and taken my chances with the law. But I can't change the past. I can only give you the tools to survive the future. The USB drive and journal will buy your safety, but only if you use them correctly. Don't go to the local police. Carver has connections everywhere. Go directly to the FBI field office in Boston. Ask for Agent Sharon Morrison. She's trustworthy. Morse vetted her himself before he died. The evidence is buried beneath the largest apple tree in the orchard, the one we planted the first year. Dig down 5 feet directly center from the trunk. You'll find a metal box. Inside is everything. I'm leaving you with an impossible choice, Diane. Use the evidence and destroy our son's father's reputation, or stay silent and risk your own life. I can't tell you what to do. I can only tell you that I love you, that I've always loved you, and that whatever you choose, I'll understand. You're stronger than you know. smarter than anyone, including me, ever gave you credit for. You'll survive this. I know you will. Forgive me if you can. Forever yours, Robert. I read the letter twice, tears streaming down my face. Thornton stood silently beside me, giving me space for my grief. Robert had told Albert, had planted the seeds of doubt and shame that had grown into this betrayal. My husband had meant to protect our son, but instead he'd destroyed him. And now I had to choose: save myself by revealing the truth, or protect Robert's memory by staying silent. Mrs. Hartwell, Thornton said gently, we need to move. We can't stay here all night. I nodded and picked up the USB drive. It was surprisingly light for something that held so much power. The journal was slim, leather-bound, filled with Robert's neat handwriting documenting everything. There's more, I said. Buried on the farm. The originals. We need to... My phone buzzed. Thornton's phone, technically, which he'd lent me. A text from an unknown number. Mrs. Hartwell, we need to talk. This is James Carver. Your son gave me this number. I understand you're upset, but I assure you, everything Albert is doing is in your best interest. Call me. Let's discuss this rationally. My blood ran cold. He has this number. How does he have this number? Thornton's expression darkened. I gave it to Albert's lawyer this afternoon when he was making threats. Standard professional courtesy. He swore under his breath, which means Carver has connections inside Albert's legal team. Another text came through. I know you're at the bank, Diane. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. The evidence you think you have is meaningless without context. I can explain everything. I can make sure you're protected, taken care of. But you need to trust me. He's watching the bank, I whispered. He knows we're here. Thornton pulled out his own phone and called Evans. Gregory, we need to leave through the loading dock. Now. He listened for a moment. I don't care about protocol. There's a dangerous man watching the building. He grabbed my elbow and guided me toward the vault door. Come on. Evans is meeting us at the back of the building with his car. We hurried through the corridors, the USB drive clutched in my hand, the journal tucked under my arm. Behind us, I heard something. A sound that might have been the main door opening. Run, Thornton said. We ran. The loading dock was at the back of the building, accessed through a service corridor that smelled of cleaning supplies and old paper. Evans was already there, his BMW idling, back door open. Get in! We threw ourselves into the back seat and Evans accelerated before I'd even closed the door. We shot out of the parking lot and onto the dark streets of Burlington. Who's following you? Evans asked, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Someone dangerous, Thornton said. Someone who's already killed at least 3 people. In the rearview mirror, I saw headlights turn onto the street behind us. A dark SUV moving fast. That's Albert's car, I said. That's my son. But as the SUV got closer, I saw there were 2 people in the front seat. Albert was driving, and in the passenger seat was a silver-haired man in an expensive suit. James Carver. The man who'd been pulling my son's strings for a year. The man who'd laundered millions and killed to keep his secrets. And he was right behind us. Hold on, Evans said, and turned hard onto a side street. The SUV followed. Evans drove like he'd done this before, fast but controlled, taking turns that forced the heavier SUV to slow down. But Albert knew these streets as well as Evans did. Better, maybe. He'd grown up here. They're gaining, Thornton said. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Carver. Diane, you're making a mistake. Pull over. Let's talk. I don't want anyone to get hurt. Then another text. This one with an attachment. A photo. It was Rachel, standing in my kitchen, holding something. It took me a moment to recognize it. The photograph from the beginning of all this. The one showing Robert and the Morses in 1992. And Rachel was holding a lighter to the corner. No, I whispered. Another text. Your daughter-in-law is at your house right now, Diane. Cleaning up. Making sure there's no evidence of any of this. Photographs, documents, personal items, all of it going up in smoke. Unless you stop and talk to me. Right now. He's burning my house, I said, my voice breaking. He's burning everything. Thornton grabbed the phone and read the texts. His face went pale. That's a felony. Arson, destruction of evidence. He doesn't care, I shouted. Don't you understand? He's already killed people. He's not going to stop because it's illegal. Chen took another hard turn. We were heading toward the highway now, toward escape. But escape to where? Carver had already proven he could find us, could track us, could destroy anything we left behind. We need to go to the FBI, Thornton said. Right now. It's the only way you'll be safe. Boston is 2 hours away, I said. The farm will be ashes by then. Everything Robert left, everything that proves what really happened, gone. You have the USB drive. You have the journal. Copies. Robert said they're copies. The originals are buried under the apple tree, and if Rachel burns down the house, they'll bulldoze the property before I can get back there. They'll find the evidence and destroy it, and all I'll have is a USB drive that any lawyer can claim was fabricated. Another text. Last chance, Diane. Pull over. Save your home. Save your son from making the worst mistake of his life. You have 30 seconds. I looked at the journal in my lap, at the USB drive, at Thornton's frightened face. I thought about Rachel setting fire to my memories, to 40 years of my life. I thought about Albert, my son, driving behind us with a murderer beside him. And I thought about Robert's letter. You're stronger than you know. Smarter than anyone ever gave you credit for. I had copies of the evidence. I had Thornton as a witness. I had William Morse's statement and his investigators' documentation. But most importantly, I had lived on that farm for 40 years. I knew every inch of it, every hiding place, every secret corner, every way in and out. They might burn the house, but they'd have to find the evidence first, and I was the only one who knew exactly where to dig. Mr. Evans, I said, my voice steady now. Turn around. We're going back to the farm. Diane, that's insane, Thornton protested. Carver is right behind us. He's waiting for exactly that. I know. But he's made a mistake. I looked at the lawyer, at his confused expression. He thinks I'm a frightened old woman who'll do anything to save her house. He doesn't know who he's dealing with. And who's he dealing with? I smiled, and it was not a kind smile. A woman who's been running a 100-acre farm by herself for 2 years, who can drive a tractor, birth a calf, and fix a fence in the dark, who survived 40 Vermont winters and buried a husband and rebuilt her life from nothing. I gripped the journal tighter. He thinks age makes me weak. He's about to learn otherwise. Chen met my eyes in the rearview mirror. You're serious? Completely. Take me home, Mr. Evans. It's time to end this. Behind us, Albert's SUV was closing in. Ahead of us, the road split, one way toward Boston and safety, the other toward my farm and a final confrontation. Chen's hands tightened on the wheel. Your funeral, lady. He turned toward the farm. And I began to plan. We reached the farm at 2:47 a.m. The house was still standing, but smoke drifted from one of the upstairs windows. My bedroom, I realized with a sick feeling. Rachel was being methodical, burning room by room, giving herself time to search for anything incriminating before destroying it all. Chen parked his BMW behind the barn, out of sight from the house. Albert's SUV pulled into the driveway 30 seconds later. Through the gaps in the barnwood, I watched my son and James Carver get out, saw them conferring in low voices, their faces illuminated by the glow from the burning bedroom. They're going to search the orchard, I said. Rachel's inside burning evidence, but Carver won't stop until he has the originals. Then we need to get there first, Thornton said. Where exactly? The largest apple tree, center of the orchard. But we can't just walk out there. They'll see us immediately. I looked around the barn, at the old equipment, the tools, the accumulated debris of 40 years of farm life. My mind worked quickly, assembling a plan from desperation and intimate knowledge of my own property. Mrs. Hartwell, Evans said nervously, maybe we should call the police now. The house is on fire. That's enough to... By the time they get here, Rachel will be gone, and Carver will claim he was trying to help Albert check on his confused mother who left the stove on. I shook my head. No, we need the evidence first. Then we call the FBI, just like Robert said. I moved deeper into the barn, to the old tractor Robert had used before upgrading 5 years ago. It still ran. I'd kept it maintained out of sentiment. Next to it was the ancient manure spreader and a pile of equipment we'd used for the organic certification process. "Here's what we're going to do," I said. 10 minutes later, I was driving the tractor toward the orchard, its headlights off, moving slowly enough that the engine noise blended with the night sounds. Thornton sat beside me, clutching a shovel. Evans had stayed behind to call 911, reporting the fire, not the rest of it. Not yet. From the house, I heard Rachel's voice calling out, "They're here! I see a car behind the barn!" Footsteps running. Albert and Carver heading toward where we'd been. The tractor rumbled past the first row of apple trees. I knew this orchard like I knew my own hands. Every tree, every slight rise in the ground, every irrigation line. Even in the dark, I could navigate it perfectly. The largest tree was in the exact center, a gnarled old giant that Robert and I had planted our first spring here. We'd been so young, so full of hope, certain that everything would grow strong and healthy. Some things had. Some things had rotted from the inside. I stopped the tractor and climbed down, my hip protesting after the earlier fall from the trellis. Thornton was already digging, his city lawyer hands clumsy with the shovel but determined. Behind us, I heard the SUV's engine roar to life. Headlights swept across the orchard. "They know where we are," Thornton gasped. "Keep digging, we're close." I grabbed a second shovel from the tractor and joined him, driving the blade into the cold earth. 5 feet down, Robert had said. 5 feet seemed impossibly far when every second counted. The SUV crashed through the orchard's edge, tearing up the carefully maintained grass paths. It skidded to a stop 20 yards away, and Albert jumped out. "Mom, stop!" I kept digging, 2 feet down now. The earth was harder here, packed tight by years of settling. Albert ran toward us, and I saw his face in the tractor's reflected dashboard light, anguished, confused, caught between competing loyalties. "Mom, please. You don't understand what you're doing." "I understand perfectly," I said, not stopping. "I understand that James Carver has been manipulating you for a year. I understand that your father made a terrible choice in 1992 to protect our family. And I understand that you were willing to lock me away rather than face the truth." "The truth?" Albert's laugh was brittle. "The truth is, Dad was a criminal. He blackmailed people, stole property, built our entire life on extortion. He protected us," I said. 3 feet now. My arms ached, but I kept digging. From men who would have killed us all. From a system that wouldn't have cared about keeping a young family together. He made an impossible choice, and he's been paying for it ever since. Carver had gotten out of the SUV now, moving more slowly, more carefully. He was smiling, I noticed. Actually smiling, as if this were all some amusing game. "Diane," he said, his voice smooth as silk, "you've led us on quite a chase. But it's over now. You can't dig fast enough. And even if you could, what then? You hand over evidence that will destroy your husband's reputation, your son's inheritance, your family's name. For what? Revenge? For justice," I said. 4 feet. The shovel hit something with a metallic clang. Carver's smile disappeared. "Albert, stop her. Now." Albert hesitated, looking between me and Carver. In that moment, I saw the little boy I'd raised, the one who'd cry over injured birds, who'd helped me nurse Robert through his final days. That boy was still in there, somewhere beneath the manipulation and fear. "Albert," I said softly, still digging around the metal object, "your father left you a letter too. It's in the safe deposit box. Read it before you do anything else. Please." "There is no letter," Carver snapped. "She's lying." "Diane, step away from the hole." He'd pulled out a gun, small, dark, pointed directly at me. Thornton froze mid-dig. "Carver, put that away. You're on camera." "What camera?" Carver laughed. "The one I'm wearing." Thornton tapped his lapel, where a small button camera was barely visible. "Recording everything. Audio and video, uploading to cloud storage in real time. Shoot anyone here, and you'll be on film committing murder. Your choice." I hadn't known about the camera. Thornton had planned ahead better than I'd given him credit for. Carver's hand wavered, but the gun stayed up. Clever. But here's the thing about lawyers. You die just as easily as anyone else. And once you're dead, I can destroy that camera and every copy you've made. You won't have time, I said. I'd reached the metal box now, was prying it loose from the earth. Because the FBI is already on their way. I texted Agent Sharon Morrison 20 minutes ago from Mr. Evans's phone. She knows everything. The money laundering, the murders, all of it. They'll be here in 30 minutes, maybe less. I hadn't actually texted anyone, but Carver didn't know that. His face went pale. You're bluffing. Am I? I pulled the metal box free and set it on the ground. It was locked, but I had the key. Another brass one, twin to the safe deposit box key that Robert had left in his note. Your entire operation documented in detail. Financial records going back 30 years. Audio recordings of your conversations with William Morse. Everything Robert collected before he made his deal. Then we'll destroy it before they arrive, Carver said, and raised the gun higher. Hand it over. Now. No. I stood up, the box clutched to my chest and faced him. An old woman in a nightgown covered in dirt, exhausted and terrified, but absolutely certain. You're going to prison, Mr. Carver. For murder, for money laundering, for everything you've done. And nothing you do here tonight will change that. Mom, Albert's voice cracked. Mom, please. He'll kill you. Then he'll kill me, I said simply. But I won't let him win. Not after what he did to your father. Not after he used you against me. In the distance, I heard sirens. Real ones this time. The fire department responding to Evans's call. And behind them, maybe, something else. More sirens. Closer. Carver heard them too. His expression hardened. Last chance, Diane. I looked at my son, at the man he'd become. Weak where I'd hoped for strength. Fearful where I'd dreamed of courage. But still my son. Still salvageable, maybe, if he made the right choice now. Albert, I said, your father loved you. Everything he did, every mistake he made was trying to give you a better life than he had. Don't let this man, this murderer, make you complicit in my death. Don't let him turn you into something you can't come back from. Albert looked at me, then at Carver, then at the gun, and he made his choice. He stepped between us, blocking Carver's shot. No, Albert said. His voice was steady now, certain. Put the gun down, James. Get out of the way, Albert. Don't be stupid. I said no. It's over. She's right. The FBI is coming. You're finished. But I don't have to be finished with you. I can still choose who I am. Carver's face twisted with rage. You pathetic! The gunshot was deafeningly loud in the quiet orchard. But it wasn't Carver's gun. It was Sheriff Daniels, appearing from behind the SUV with 3 deputies. His weapon pointed at Carver's head. Drop it! Drop the weapon now! Carver stood frozen for a long moment, the gun still pointed at Albert's back. Then, slowly, he lowered it and let it fall to the ground. Daniels kicked the weapon away and cuffed Carver with practiced efficiency. James Carver, you're under arrest for attempted murder, criminal threatening, and conspiracy to commit arson. You have the right to remain. The Miranda rights faded into background noise as I sank to the ground, the metal box still clutched against my chest. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold it. Albert knelt beside me, his face wet with tears. Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the boy I'd raised fighting to resurface through years of manipulation and fear and shame. You chose right, I whispered. At the last moment, you chose right. That's what matters. Thornton helped me to my feet as more vehicles arrived. Fire trucks, more police cars, and finally, a black sedan that screamed federal authority. A woman in her 40s got out, badge already visible. Agent Sharon Morrison, FBI, she said, approaching us. I got a very interesting call about an hour ago from a lawyer named Gregory Evans. He said Diane Hartwell might need federal assistance. She looked at the metal box in my arms. I assume that's the evidence? I handed it to her, feeling the weight of 33 years lift from my shoulders. Everything you need. Financial records, audio recordings, documentation of a money laundering operation and 3 murders. William and Catherine Morse, and my husband, Robert Hartwell. Morrison took the box carefully, reverently. We've been investigating Carver's organization for 2 years. This might be exactly what we need to bring down the whole network." She looked at Carver, now sitting in the back of a patrol car. "Well done, Mrs. Hartwell." Rachel was brought out of the house in handcuffs, her expensive coat covered in ash. She wouldn't meet my eyes. The fire department was hosing down my bedroom, though the damage was extensive. But the house would survive, could be repaired, unlike some things. I walked back to where Albert stood alone, watching everything with a shell-shocked expression. "There's a letter," I told him. "In the safe deposit box in Burlington. Your father wrote it 10 years ago, after he told you about the money. Read it. It explains everything. The choices he made, the reasons why, what he wanted for you. I don't deserve— Read it anyway, and then decide who you want to be. But Albert," I looked at him steadily, "if you choose to be the man James Carver tried to make you, if you choose greed and manipulation over truth and family, don't come back to this farm. I'll rebuild without you. And if I choose better?" I thought about it. About forgiveness and family and second chances. About how Robert had made terrible choices trying to protect the people he loved, and how those choices had rippled forward through decades. "Then we'll talk," I said finally. "We'll talk about what comes next. But the trust, that's gone, Albert. You'll have to earn that back if you can." He nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I understand." Agent Morrison approached again. "Mrs. Hartwell, I'll need you to come to Boston tomorrow to give a formal statement. Can you do that?" "Yes." "Good. And Mrs. Hartwell? William Morse was right about you. You are smarter than anyone gave you credit for." As the federal agents worked the scene, as the fire trucks finished their work, as my son stood alone with his choices, I walked back to the largest apple tree. The hole we'd dug gaped open like a wound in the earth. Robert and I had planted this tree with such hope. We'd watered it through droughts, pruned it through winters, harvested its fruit every fall. We'd built our life around it, literally and figuratively. And all the while, beneath its roots, the evidence of our compromise had been waiting. I knelt and touched the earth, thinking about the man I'd married, the choices he'd made, the price we'd all paid. "I found it, Robert," I whispered to the cold November night. "I found it, and I finished what you started. Rest now." The wind rustled through the bare branches above me, carrying the smell of smoke and the promise of dawn. It was over. Almost. 3 months later, I stood in the rebuilt bedroom, running my hand along the fresh paint. The room smelled of primer and new wood, scents of renewal, not ash. Through the window, I could see the orchard, the trees just beginning to show the first hints of spring buds. The largest apple tree stood in the center, marked now by nothing more than a circle of fresh soil where we'd filled in the hole. The evidence it had protected was in federal custody, being used to dismantle what Agent Morrison called one of the most sophisticated money laundering operations in the Northeast. James Carver was in prison awaiting trial on 17 counts, including 3 murders. The accelerated cancer that had killed Robert. Morrison had found the specialist Carver had hired, a doctor who'd since fled to Brazil but left behind enough documentation to prove what they'd done. William and Catherine Morse's car accident had been reinvestigated, revealing brake line tampering that the initial investigation had missed. Rachel had taken a plea deal, agreeing to testify against Carver in exchange for a reduced sentence. She'd be out in 5 years, maybe less with good behavior. She'd never contacted me, never apologized. I didn't expect she would. The doorbell rang, pulling me from my thoughts. I descended the stairs slowly. My hip still ached on cold mornings, a permanent reminder of the night I'd climbed down the trellis, and opened the door. Albert stood on the porch, holding a bakery box and looking uncertain. It was his 4th visit since that night. The first 3 had been brief, awkward, both of us tiptoeing around everything that had happened. But he kept coming back, kept trying, and that counted for something. "Hi, Mom," he said quietly. "I brought coffee cake, the kind Dad used to like." I stepped aside to let him in. "Thank you." We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd found the photograph that had started everything. That photograph was now evidence in a federal case, along with so many other pieces of my life. But I had copies and memories, And slowly, I was rebuilding what had been taken. I read Dad's letter, Albert said after a long silence. The one from the safe deposit box. I've read it probably 50 times now. I waited. Robert's second letter had been addressed to Albert, explaining everything. Not just the facts of what had happened, but the emotions behind it. The fear, the desperation, the love that had driven every choice. I'd read it once with James Thornton's permission before it went into evidence. It had made me cry for days. He loved me, Albert continued, his voice thick. I knew that intellectually, but I'd convinced myself that the love was conditional, that if he'd really loved me, he wouldn't have built our life on a lie. And now? Now I understand that he built our life on a sacrifice. He saw an opportunity to give us something better, something he'd never had, and he took it, even knowing the risk, even knowing he'd have to carry that weight forever. Albert looked up at me, his eyes red. I spent 10 years hating him for being imperfect, for not being the hero I'd imagined, and then I let that hatred make me into someone even worse. I reached across the table and covered his hand with mine. You chose right when it mattered most. You stood between me and a loaded gun. That's not nothing, Albert. It should have been sooner. I should have seen what Carver was doing, should have questioned. His voice broke. I almost got you killed, Mom. I almost became an accomplice to murder because I was so caught up in protecting my own image, my own reputation. But you didn't. You stopped. You made a choice. At the last possible second. After months of working against you. Trying to have you declared incompetent. Believing every lie Carver fed me. He pulled his hand back and stood up, pacing to the window. The lawyer Dad wanted me to read the letter with. The one who was supposed to be executor of his will. Carver got to him first. Told him I was concerned about your mental state. Asked him to recommend doctors who could evaluate you. I thought I was being responsible. Thought I was protecting the family. I joined him at the window, looking out at the land Robert and I had built together. Carver was good at manipulation. He had practice. He knew exactly what buttons to push, what fears to exploit. You're not the first person he's fooled, and you wouldn't have been the last. That doesn't excuse it. No, I agreed. It doesn't. But understanding it is the first step to making sure it doesn't happen again. Albert was quiet for a long moment. Then, I saw Rachel yesterday, at the county jail. She asked me to write a letter to the judge, asking for leniency. Are you going to? I told her no. He turned to face me. I told her that what she did, helping Carver burn your house, destroy evidence, trap you, that was unforgivable. That even if we'd both been wrong about Dad's choices, what she chose to do was something else entirely. Something criminal. How did she take it? She said I was choosing you over her, that I'd regret it. He laughed bitterly. She still doesn't get it. She still thinks this is about sides, about loyalty, about who wins. She doesn't understand that it's about right and wrong. I thought about Rachel, about how she'd smiled when suggesting care facilities, how she'd held that lighter to the photograph. Some people could be saved from their own worst impulses. Others couldn't. The divorce papers came through last week, Albert continued. It's final. She gets nothing from me, and I get nothing from her. Clean break. I'm sorry. I'm not. Not anymore. He looked at me with something like his father's determination. Mom, I know you said we could talk about what comes next, but I need to say something first. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. What I did, what I tried to do to you, that's something I'll have to live with forever. Albert, please, let me finish. He took a deep breath. But I want to try to be better. To be the man Dad hoped I'd be. The man you raised me to be before I lost my way. And I know that starts with actions, not words. So I'm asking, can I help with the farm? Not as an owner, not as someone with any claim to it. Just as someone who wants to work, to learn, to rebuild what I helped damage. I studied my son, the gray showing at his temples now, the lines around his eyes that had deepened over these past 3 months. He looked older, wearier, but also somehow more solid, more real. The spring planting starts in 2 weeks, I said slowly. The orchard needs pruning. The north fence needs repair. There's a new irrigation system being installed that I could use help with. Hope flickered in his eyes. I could do that. I could do all of that. It's hard work. Long days. Your hands will blister and your back will ache and you'll go home exhausted every night. I know. And at the end of it, I still might not trust you. I still might decide this farm is mine alone, that you lost your right to any part of it when you tried to take it from me. I understand. I looked out at the orchard again, at the land that had cost Robert his integrity, his peace of mind, and ultimately his life. The land that I'd fought to keep, that I'd nearly died protecting. It was just land, just trees and soil and hard work. But it was also legacy, family, the physical manifestation of every choice we'd made, good and bad. Be here at 6 a.m., I said. Bring work gloves and wear clothes you don't mind ruining. Albert's face transformed. Thank you, Mom. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We'll see if you last a week. But I was smiling as I said it, and so was he. After Albert left, I walked out to the orchard alone. It was what I did most evenings now, a ritual of remembrance and renewal. I touched the bark of the trees Robert and I had planted together, noted which ones needed attention, planned the season ahead. At the largest tree, I stopped. Someone had left flowers, Agent Morrison, who visited occasionally to update me on the case. She'd become something like a friend, this federal agent who understood that justice was more than just closing cases. Mrs. Hartwell? I turned to find James Thornton walking up the path, briefcase in hand. He visited too, usually with documents that needed signing or news about William Morse's estate. The $4 million was mine now, legally and completely. I'd set most of it aside, unsure what to do with money that carried such weight. James, I said warmly, I wasn't expecting you today. I have news. He was smiling, which usually meant good news. The last of Carver's associates took a plea deal this morning. Morrison says they have enough now to put him away for life, possibly multiple life sentences. It's over, Diane. Really over. I felt something loosen in my chest, a tension I'd been carrying for so long I'd forgotten it was there. Thank you. For everything. For believing me. For helping me. For doing my job? He shook his head. Diane, you saved yourself. I just provided a car and some documentation. Everything else, the courage, the intelligence, the sheer determination to see it through, that was all you. Robert would have been proud, I said softly. Robert would have been grateful, Thornton corrected. He left you the tools, but you're the one who figured out how to use them. That letter he left, he said you were smarter than anyone gave you credit for. He was right, but even he didn't know how right. We stood in comfortable silence for a moment, looking out over the orchard. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. What will you do now? Thornton asked. With the farm, with the money, with everything? I'd been thinking about that question for weeks. The truth was, I didn't need to do anything dramatic. I didn't need to start a foundation or travel the world or make grand gestures. Those were the fantasies of people who didn't understand that sometimes the victory was simply in continuing, in surviving, in choosing to stay and build despite everything. I'm going to run my farm, I said. I'm going to repair what was damaged and plant what needs planting. I'm going to watch my son try to become a better man and decide, season by season, whether I believe his efforts are genuine. I'm going to have coffee with Sheriff Daniels once a week and dinner with Sharon Morrison once a month. I'm going to live. That's it? That's everything. I smiled at him. I'm 63 years old, James. I've survived my husband's death, my son's betrayal, an attempted murder, and a conspiracy 3 decades in the making. I've learned that I'm stronger than I thought, smarter than I was given credit for, and more capable than anyone, including myself, believed. That's not nothing. That's not small. That's a victory worth celebrating every single day. Thornton nodded slowly. You're remarkable, Diane. No, I said. I'm just what every woman my age is. A survivor who learned to use her intelligence instead of accepting others' definitions of her limitations. We're everywhere, James. In every town, every family, every situation where people underestimate us because we're old or female or just mothers or farmers or ordinary women. We're the ones who remember everything, who notice what others miss, who outlast the people who think youth and strength are the only powers that matter. I turned back to the largest apple tree, to the spot where Robert had buried his secrets. He thought he was protecting me by keeping me ignorant. But ignorance isn't protection. It's just another kind of trap. What protected me was 40 years of learning this land, of building strength through hard work, of developing the kind of wisdom that only comes from living fully and paying attention. "Will you tell your story?" Thornton asked. "The media has been calling. There's interest in—" "No." My voice was firm. "This isn't a story for public consumption. This is my life, my family's private pain and private redemption. Let them write about Carver and his crimes. Let them celebrate the FBI's victory. But my part in it, that stays here, on this land, with the people who lived it." As Thornton walked back to his car, I remained under the apple tree, watching the last light fade from the sky. Tomorrow, Albert would arrive at 6 a.m., and we'd begin the slow process of possibly rebuilding something resembling a family. Or maybe we wouldn't. Maybe he'd last a week and decide farm work was too hard, or I'd decide his presence was too painful. Either way, I'd be fine. The farm would continue, the seasons would turn, the apples would grow, and I would be here, tending what mattered, protecting what was mine, living the life I'd fought for. The phone rang in my pocket. My new phone, with a new number only a handful of people had. I checked the screen. Albert. For a moment, I hesitated, feeling an echo of those nights when his calls had been threats disguised as concern. But that was then. This was now. And now was full of possibility, however fragile. "Hello, Albert," I said. "Hi, Mom. I just wanted to say, I'm looking forward to tomorrow, to working with you, to learning from you." 6 a.m., I reminded him. "Don't be late." "I won't. Mom, I love you." The words hung in the air between us, weighted with all the months of betrayal and hurt, but also with the possibility of something better. "I know," I said finally. "We'll talk tomorrow." I hung up and slipped the phone back into my pocket. The first stars were appearing in the darkening sky, the same stars that had witnessed everything. Robert's original bargain, my desperate flight, the final confrontation, and now this quiet moment of maybe peace. I walked back to the house, my house, its windows glowing warm against the twilight. Inside there was coffee to make for tomorrow's early start, accounts to review, a life to continue living. I was 63 years old. I had survived. I had won. And tomorrow I would wake up and do the work that needed doing, the same as I'd done for 40 years, the same as I'd do for however many years remained to me. Because that was the real victory, not the dramatic confrontation or the evidence or the arrests. The real victory was in continuing, in refusing to be diminished, dismissed, or destroyed by people who thought age and gender made me weak. I was Diane Hartwell. I ran a 100-acre farm. I'd buried one husband and rebuilt my life. I'd outwitted criminals and survived my son's betrayal. I'd climbed down a trellis at 63 and dug up evidence in the middle of the night and faced down a loaded gun without flinching. And tomorrow, I'd prune apple trees. That was strength. That was wisdom. That was victory. I turned off the porch light and locked the door. The lock I'd changed, to a system only I controlled, and smiled. The house settled around me with its familiar sounds, no longer threatening, no longer full of secrets, just home. Finally, truly, home. Now tell me, what would you have done if you were in my place? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to check out the video on your screen right now. I'm sure it will surprise you.